Great.
All right, good morning. I'm Heidi Dudek. I introduced myself at the last meeting, but I'm the section chief for DEC, Division of Environmental Remediation, overseeing the remediation of the 250 Water Street Brownfield site. Since the last meeting, we've really done a lot. We've accomplished a lot. DEC and DOH have met with the community consultants regarding the remedial design investigation work plan several times, including with everybody with Langan Engineering, who is HHC's environmental engineer. These meetings were really productive. And based on yesterday afternoon's call, I think that with all parties, we've reached resolution on all the comments on the remedial design investigation work plan, and we are anticipating that we will receive later today an approvable work plan, and that work will commence on Saturday, February 12th, and work on February 13th with test pitting, and that the waste characterization borings will be completed on the week of February break, February 21st, with those 2 weekends that bookend that week. I really don't want to steal the thunder from Langan and from the community consultants on the changes that have been made to the remedial design investigation work plan to address the community consultants' comments, so I'm going to let them go through that. One other item that we've discussed at length is what we can do to, and we being DEC and DOH, to provide assurance to the public that we really do take your comments seriously. We have ensured that both that the remedial investigations, any work on site, and that the remedial action work plan is extremely protective of human health. And that includes taking into account that there are 2 schools next to the site and all the apartments there. We really have, we've discussed it with the community consultants, the best management practices that are going on site, what how the camp is implemented, and that this really is a very robust protective remedy and implementation plan. So I think that's pretty much it for a DEC and DOH update. Again, we're anticipating having an approvable remedial design investigation work plan sometime later today, and that we would be conducting, or Langan will be conducting work this coming weekend, and then the week of the 21st with those bookend weekends. So I think with that, I think it's best to put it over to either Langan Engineering or the community consultants.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna just tee up my little slide deck. Give me a quick second. Wrong screen. I feel like you're still seeing the wrong screen, correct? Nobody sees my slide deck?
We are seeing 2. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Green slide start.
Wonderful. All right.
Hell no.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, so I'll just give a little overview of the changes that have been made to the remedial design investigation work plan. And the changes were made based on input from the community consultants, as well as the robust discussions with DEC, DOH, and the community consultants that have been undertaken over the last week or so. Let's see. Okay, so the first, sorry, I've got to navigate my screens here. All right, so here's kind of an outline and overview of some of the changes that were made. First changes, we've added 2 test pits, and I'll get into some details on those test pits in a moment. We've increased the depth of all test pits to 8 feet below grade or to the groundwater table, whichever is shallower. We've added some language to clarify management of investigation-derived waste that may be generated from test pit excavations. We've included certain provisions for the restoration of test pits, and we've added an organic vapor suppressant. We've added additional information on the organic vapor suppressant foam that we will be using, and have included the safety data sheet for that, for Biosolve, which is the material or the foam that we will be using on this site. Oops. All right, so this slide here shows the original locations of the test pits that we proposed. We do not, so this shows the original locations, and this shows the original locations, one of which has been slightly amended, as well as 2 additional locations. 2 test pits, the 2 new test pits, TP4 and TP5, they will be located, one will be located in this thermometer workshop up here. A second one will be placed here in an area that was formerly depressed from a topographical perspective due to settlement. This location has been slightly shifted to the southeast, and the other 2 locations remain the same. We've made a couple of changes to the construction health and safety plan, which I'll go over as well. We've clarified camp procedures for turning on and off the camp equipment. What we will be doing is at the end of each workday, we will be walking to each camp station with the handheld Jerome 505 mercury vapor analyzer and the photoionization detector, and we will not turn the stations off until we confirm that the instantaneous readings have returned to background conditions. We have clarified daily reporting procedures of the handheld Jerome 505 readings. We have clarified the daily reporting procedures for offsite air monitoring. When a camp station is placed across the street, the monitoring time period will be included in daily reports. And finally, raw camp data will be provided with typical daily reports and camp summaries. The test pits are planned for, as Heidi mentioned, the tests provided we receive and approval of our revised work plan. The test pits will commence on Saturday, February 12th, and hopefully we will tie up on February 13th. We will be reviewing the air monitoring data from the test pit exercise during the week of February 14th to 18th. And we anticipate beginning soil borings on February 21st. And we will be working on those borings until they are all completed. But our schedule, if everything goes according to plan, will have us demobilizing on or before February 25th. At the completion of the field activities, we will be preparing 2 remedial design and investigation memorandums. One will summarize the findings of the test pit exercise with the air monitoring data, and the second will effectively be a waste characterization report and will document the waste characterization exercise. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Mimi. Okay, so next up we will go to the any thoughts or responses from the community consultants. So I think Laura, you first.
Yeah, I'll take the first shot at it. So just to mirror what Heidi and Mimi had said, we had extensive discussions back and forth. First, I want to thank the agencies and Langan HHC for giving us, Tom Facil and I from the Blue School, so much time to go through these. DOH was also on the calls that we had, along with Rafael Lam, the project manager for DEC. Essentially, all of the concerns that we outlined in our letter were discussed. One of the concerns I know that was expressed by the community and also by the consultants was the use of the mercury vapor analyzers in the field. So I want to make sure that I point out directly that DOH did a review of the EPA report. We discussed their findings. They concluded that the Jerome J405, which is in the camp unit, is sensitive enough for the camp purposes because it's sensitive to the action limit. The action limit for mercury being based on a 15-minute time-weighted average. So it's not an instantaneous reading, but it's sensitive enough to be able to determine what's going on in the work zone and at the camp. And if anything, it's going to result in an alarm level before the that might be overestimated and not actually reading the true lower value. The instantaneous readings from the Jerome 505, an instrument which is definitely sensitive and reliable, will be, the instrument will be warmed up properly. That's one of the things that was mentioned in the EPA report. But DOH concluded that both instruments were appropriate. Tom Fasil and I had independent discussions. I also spoke with other mercury vapor analyzer providers, information that was provided to us by the community, verified that these are the best instruments for this purpose. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions on that later, but I just want to make sure that you guys realize that we spent a tremendous amount of time on that issue. It was very important for us to come to the conclusion that the instruments being used at the site, the 405 is tied into the camp units and is reading concentrations that are hooked into a telemetry system. So it's data that's saved, and not every instrument can do that. So that's one of the reasons why that instrument is an appropriate use, but it's also sensitive enough and reliable enough. The 505, again, is the handheld instrument that the downwind monitor is going to use. As Mimi indicated, one of the concerns from us in the community was as the camp units are getting ready to be turned off, the J505, the more sensitive handheld instrument, will be used to make sure that those levels are coming down if there was a trend where the levels were starting to rise over the course of the day, not over action levels, but just showing that there's something rising. Before the unit is turned off, they're going to check it with the 505. If the levels are not coming down, then they will continue to monitor for 15 minutes. They'll monitor after the camps are turned off to document that the levels are decreasing after the camp unit is turned off. So there'll be a period of time where they monitor a decreasing trend over a period of 15 minutes, and that will all be documented on the daily field reports. So one of the biggest changes is the J505 readings that are done by the downwind monitor are going to now be recorded on the daily field reports. Raw data are going to also be provided so that we can take a look at what concentrations are being reported. The other change I wanted to note that Mimi didn't get into, because it may be a small detail, but it's important. When the camp unit, when situation occurs where the camp unit is moved to the opposite side of the street, that occurs when work is within 20 feet of the property boundary. The data from the time frame that camp unit is on the other side of the street will be noted in the daily field report. And since the raw data will be provided, then we can take a look at what those levels are on the during that offsite camp period. The daily field reports will note when the camp was moved across the street, during which time frames. So that's an important, also additional piece of information for us to be able to review and for the community to be able to review. So there really was a significant number of changes that were made to address the concerns that were expressed. Tom Fasil and I are very comfortable with the resultant outcome in terms of the increase in the test pit locations. We felt that the dialogue regarding that was very well received and productive. We appreciate both DEC's and Langan's and AGC's responsiveness to those concerns, and the outcome in the revisions to the remedial design investigation work plan. But we are definitely comfortable with proceeding this weekend, where I think everybody is at the point now where we are in agreement that the work needs to be done, but it will be done very safely and methodically. All the best management practices that were already in the plan will be utilized in the event that anything does start to be detected that is of concern. As Mimi mentioned, there's actually an addition of a petroleum odor suppressant foam, which is a foam that she was referring to, the Biosolve. Material safety data sheet will be provided. That's in addition to the Mercon X, which will be for the mercury vapor management in the event that there is an issue that results in the need to use that type of foam. So we have both of those types of foams available in the event of petroleum odor that might come about because of the historic discharges from tanks on the site. And then in addition to that, the Mercon X. The material safety data sheet for the Mercon X was provided in the remedial design investigation. It is safe to use. It was explained how it works. If anyone has any questions on that, we'd be happy to address those as well. I know I just threw a lot of information out there, but there's a lot of information that we've been discussing in the past week. I know there were potentially other topics that I might not have specifically hit on. Tom, if I missed anything, is Tom on? I don't know if Tom's on. Does anyone see Tom Fasillo on the list of attendees?
I just joined, Laura.
Oh, hey, Tom. I think I covered all the key changes in addition to what to supplement what Mimi indicated. But if I missed anything, please chime in and I'll be happy to address it.
Yeah, Tom, do you have anything to add at this point?
Yeah, sorry, I'm late to the call. I mean, Laura and I have had multiple conversations with each other and as well as with DEC, DOH, and Langan over the last week. I'm assuming Laura covered all of those things. I don't know if there's anything specific, Laura, you want me to address.
I mean, I guess confirmation from all of our discussions with DEC, DOH, and Langan regarding the changes and the fact that the implementation of the camp. I mean, one of the things I think that we want that throughout our conversations in the last week, it became apparent to us as we were discussing everything that it's important to emphasize that the concentrations that are being measured in the camp for both volatile organics and for mercury and dust are based on 15-minute time-weighted averages. The action levels are predicated on that. It's not the instantaneous readings that the action levels are predicated on. And so that's why it's important for us to know that when we look at the raw instantaneous measurements from the J505 or being reported as maximum concentrations in the camp unit itself, that indicates that there's some detection of mercury vapor, but the levels are low and they're not even approaching the action level because the action level is based on that 15-minute time-weighted average. So we know that there are some indications of mercury vapor, and that's why the test pits are now being done to open up the pavement for the first time on a larger scale, approximately 5 foot by 5 foot, maybe even a little larger, depending upon the need to get down to the greater depth of 8 feet. And that will give us better information as to what can be expected relative to the previous, 4-inch diameter soil borings. And that's one of the purposes of doing the test pits, is to be able to get a better idea of what to expect when the full-scale remediation takes place. So this is a very important transitional step, and that's why it's in the remedial design investigation work plan to begin with. So if anybody has any questions about that, that's why we're here. Tom and I can address your questions, Langan, as well as DC and DOH.
Great.
And
just
I
want to
guess
make sure
I'll just add, Laura, we and you and others had provided comments. The working group had provided comments to the DEC. We've had a lot of discussions with DEC and DOH over the past week regarding all of the comments, and we feel comfortable. I certainly feel comfortable with the changes that have been made, that the work that's being proposed to be conducted into conducting the test pits can be done in a safe manner with all of the protocols that are in place, including preparations for responding in case there is detection of something in the work zone to shut down and to address it. So I think we feel comfortable. I certainly feel comfortable with protocols that we have discussed with DEC, DOH, and Langan, that the test pit work can be done safely.
So if you folks are done, I would note there are several questions in the chat, which if the Enviro consultants might want to take a look at. And I mean, some of them are just to Laura, but I think maybe everybody should take a look at those. And we will get, we'll get to them soon. Just so the next, next time we want to have discussion and Q&A. The first item on the agenda there is the community notification and process. So, part of the purpose of convening this working group is to make sure that information is available, that it is shared, that we're all hearing the same things. I think there is some continuing concern about the manner in which information flows. Like, for example, the fact that work is scheduled for the day after tomorrow. I think some participants had heard that and some hadn't. We had questions that had arisen out of the last meeting, and I think we got some of the answers kind of yesterday in the latter part of the day. And I should acknowledge Emily from my staff who's been doing a lot of work of wrangling all the information and getting the agenda out. But I just wonder, is there, I guess, sort of a question about process, then a substantive question. Can we commit to having some kind of distribution list? Like in some cases, I think even the elected offices had not heard some things that the schools had heard about until kind of there were questions asked. And then the other question is, can somebody talk about the rationale for starting this weekend? I think it reflects a desire to meet the community's desire to have this work done while people aren't in school and to use the break. But can people talk about both the process and then the decision there?
Yeah, hi, this is Heidi. I can address that. Communication, we had responded back with question that we needed to, with regards to the Q&A from the January meeting, that to ensure that the comments were addressed in a consistent manner with the revised remedial design investigation work plan, and that we had a chance to actually discuss those comments with the community consultants. We had to wait until those meetings had happened and that resolution had been reached, so that when we sent out something yesterday afternoon, it was consistent. The last thing we wanted to do is put something out and have to rescind it. So it has to do with the timing of that. The community had requested that the work happen on weekends and that it would happen during February break. In January, we had said that as soon as we have an approvable remedial design investigation work plan, work would be beginning. So again, in order to make sure that all the information was available as soon as possible, as Laura had indicated, these test pits are going to be what drives any changes to the means and methods to the remedial design or the remedial action. So it was very critical to do that. In order for the borings to be completed during that week when school is out, the test pits needed to be completed on the weekend. And again, because that would predicate whether or not there was going to be any changes or anything to the plan. So that was why it happened. With regards to communication, we've been communicating with Community Board 1 and that they have been our point of contact to distribute information. We've also communicated directly with the principals of the two schools. And then I know that your office has been communicating with our division here also. If we'd like to have one point of contact, that we send it out to you so that it can make sure that it goes out to the community in your area. Obviously, we'll figure a way to do that and make sure that everybody has the information.
Yeah, I think that, I'm not saying it has to be one point of contact, but I think it would be helpful if, certainly I wouldn't say if you have something, don't send it to the community board or to the schools directly, but I think it would be helpful if we could get it. If anything you're announcing in real time, if we could get it and make sure I think we or the electeds or the community board, frankly, would play the role of disseminating it. I think we should just make sure that, everybody involved in this process has.
Sure, I think that we were, yep. Okay. Absolutely, and that's what we were doing. Unfortunately, I think there was 3.5 weeks between the two meetings in response to comments and that, so.
Right, okay. I'll leave it there. If other people want to chime in on that communication issue, why don't we, any other, just since that's the first thing on the agenda, any other questions or comments or concerns about sort of communication and process here?
There's some hands up, Brian.
Can I just chime in, or is
somehow I can't. Oh, now I see hands. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. Why don't we start with somebody who are new, or one of our co-conveners of this work?
I have Tammy start. It's okay. She had her hand up.
Okay.
Protocol says that you go first, Yulene. I'm just the community board. You go first.
Well, so for the communication part, what is the community notification process and what constitutes like a shutdown of the site, for example?
Sorry, I was on mute. Well, the first thing is going to be is that actually shutdown of the site would be in the work zone. If you have an exceedance of the action levels and the threshold values for either volatiles or mercury within the work zone, that's the first thing. They shut down all activities. They determine whether or not they're real values or not. Again, we're dealing with extremely sensitive instruments. Obviously, depending on the value, they're going to shut it down. If they see that there's a high exceedance, that's when MERCON-X is going to come into value if you're approaching an action level. And then, they're going to determine whether it's a step, do you step back? Do you, and this is all written into the health and safety plan and the camp. That's the way it works. It is, and Laura and Mimi could provide better overview of it, but essentially the first area where everything is going to happen is in the work zone. That's where you're actually, if you're going to see anything, that would be where it is. And once that's, once you have an exceedance there, then everything gets changed down. They look at the best management practices. What do they need to change? Do they need to step back, reevaluate, stop for the day, close everything up, come back at another time, discuss it and things like that. It's essentially as if you were working on any kind of other site.
And so the community notification process would be in what order?
Well, I mean, it's the community notification, I guess. If there's an exceedance in the work zone, that isn't anything that the community would be. It's not that there's an exceedance off the site. Again, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding how a community air monitoring plan works. There are different, I guess, steps within the plan on how things work. The very first thing, it's just, it's a sequential type thing is at the work zone itself. If there's an exceedance there, they're going to stop things. They're going to change protocols, look at what needs to be done before it even becomes an issue at the property boundary. That's what I think is a missing part of understanding the camp.
So the shutdown would happen first, and then it would be.
Yeah, we would.
This is Gerard Burke. Heidi,
mind
if I take this for a second?
Absolutely.
During the remedial investigation, we had established lines of communication for the work that was going on in the field. And I think we just reinstitute that where it was who got it. I don't remember it exactly, but we have a list of people. If we ever had to stop the work, they're notified, and then it goes through a chain of notifications. But it was established for the work during the RI, and it'll be very similar. I think we'd have to update it, but I'm pretty sure Mimi has that list.
Yeah. Nice one. Yep. Yes, Mimi has that list. I think she's on mute right now. But again, it's highly unlikely because again, we're going to be the way the camp is implemented. It actually is at the work zone that where first steps would be taken. But there is a plan in place for notification. Okay.
Is there a way that we could have that shared to our chat?
We can, it's posted, it's in the remedial design investigation in the camp, but we will, I'll ask Langan to pull that section out and we'll post it separately.
Okay, thank you.
If I could chime in for a second, I think it's critically important. We've been now working on this, I think, from the beginning of the remedial investigation work plan stage, where the camp action level being set at the 1 microgram per cubic meter. The agencies and Langan Agency agreeing to set that limit for the protection of the community. The work zone limit is a little higher than that, and that's why everything happens first in the work zone. So if there's any indication of mercury or VOC concentrations rising in the work zone, immediate actions are taken once the concentrations get to the action limits in the work zone. The downwind monitor piece, the individual technician who has the handheld instruments, including the Jerome 505 mercury vapor analyzer and an instrument for volatile organics and dust. That individual is keeping track of the wind direction and is between the work zone and the nearest down gradient camp unit on the perimeter of the property. That's the early warning system in addition to the interior work zone camp. So there's that extra layer of monitoring before the concentrations. We're not just relying on the perimeter camp, we have that downwind monitor. And that's where the Jerome 505 comes in. So we have 2 layers of monitoring, and that was by design from the remedial investigation work plan phase. Those were comments that we put out that the agency and Langan Agency agreed to implement. So as Heidi indicated, this is still, this is a remedial design investigation, but it is still investigatory. So the work in each test pit area, which will be fenced off with the noise blankets interior to that, and the work zone camp inside that, and the downwind monitor outside that fence area between the work zone and the downwind camp. The sequence of events would be communication between the work zone workers, that levels are starting to rise to a level of concern, and then the work shuts down. The downwind monitor is already out there to confirm that there is no issue in the downwind direction. But this is a very fast response. It's all written up in the protocol for the remedial design investigation. And depending upon what the levels are, whether they're volatile organics from petroleum releases or whether it's mercury vapor, the appropriate steps will be taken. The best management practices are really the key when it comes to what happens during this test pit exercise, because it's important to get this information so that it can inform the next phase of, the full scale excavation. Just like in the beginning when we did the RI, it's data driven, and that is still the case. Just wanted to reemphasize.
I want to bring up like a real life moment thing regarding this work starting on Saturday. I'm sorry, Eileen. But back to what Brian brought up about how the communication. How about we have a good old fashioned test of, did you get this email? Because I would like to know that it's working before Saturday.
Yeah,
and I think that's.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to set up what they used to call back in the day a listserv, where there's like a list of emails that everything goes out to, so everybody sees the thing at the same time. I think we'd be happy to do the work of setting that up through Google or whatever, and then I think we should just do a distribution, and then everybody can go make sure it's not going into their trash folder or whatever, spam. But why don't we, I think we could commit to setting that up later this afternoon, if that's helpful, and we'll just send out a test.
Well, if it's not working, I don't know if it should start on Sat. I don't want to be, but how do you start a process when you don't know that the emergency part of it is working properly? Yeah. So I'm sorry that this is happening so quickly.
No, I agree. Like, I agree with you that the time frame is tight, but why don't we, we will be done with this meeting by early afternoon, and why don't we set it up and test it? I think we can test it today, and if it doesn't work, that's an issue we'll try to address.
But that be with the actual group of names that they were talking about, like that Heidi and
yeah, I mean, just to add to that, like, while that work would be appreciated, I feel like that's groundwork that should have been done during the RWIP and all that. So I would be very, very, very concerned if the DEC plus Langan didn't have that list already ready. And if they aren't able to test it immediately, I think that.
I believe there was a list that was put together that Langan has and Howard Hughes Corporation have been using to notify the public of work. And I believe that that's what was used for various different correspondences that all of you have responded to. We can ask Mimi to send out a notification from that right after this meeting to make sure that it goes through. And again, we also have the DEC listserv, which we've had out there since the beginning of the project, that everybody also has responded to, and we can put out the notification via that also.
Okay, just to ask the question, Heidi, there were some notifications that went out this week. Those did not go to those lists?
No, because those are not official. I mean, until we have an RDI work plan that's approvable, there are certain things that we've sent out. We've communicated with the work group, and Emily was the one that was going to distribute that. Again, trying to keep one point of contact so that we don't have multiple lines of communication, which is what was happened in the past and has caused communication issues. again, the last, in January, we stated quite clearly that once the remedial design investigation work plan was approved, that the work would be commencing. At that point in time, it was estimated that the work would be beginning on January 5th. However, we've shifted it now based on the community concerns. We've shifted it now to the 12th and the 13th and to the February break. We also discussed this with the community consultants and asked that, if there, to make sure that when they were talking with their clients, if there's anything there, that they could make sure that they were notified. And I believe that in my email that went out on that last week or Monday, sorry, I can't remember, also went to the schools, and the schools would be then the ones that would be notifying their
So
population.
then is there a way to test to see if the system works right now, like for the community?
I mean, I can send out an email to the group that I sent out. I've received comments on all the emails that I sent out previously.
No,
but we can do
you
that
said that
again.
they were different. You just said that they were different. So like you just said that the email serve
We'll send out a listserv. We will send out a listserv, but that's the one that
that's
sends out
the community notification process when something goes wrong.
No, the community, that is a different one. There's two different ones. We will
That's what
have
I'm saying.
me
So,
and
like,
Laura send out we will send out this afternoon the list that's in the work plan, and we'll ask for confirmation from that list. There are redundant contacts in that list. We will also send out, so that everybody can ensure that they're there, I will send out a listserv notification that the work will be commencing. Howard Hughes also has the way that they've been doing, which was set up at the very beginning of the remedial investigation to the public. It's a huge listserv that they send out all of their notifications and that's how they notified with the geotechnical borings and everything else like that. I'll ask Langan Engineering to send out a notification that way also. Again, at this point in time, there also needs to be a clear understanding that work on the site, the way that it's set up, again, with those multiple layers, for an action level to be exceeded and for notification, it's highly improbable. We will have that there. I just don't want everybody to feel that, that we haven't taken these things into consideration. There are, everything is in place. These are standard protocols that are on any kind of site of this type of nature. Anything that's dealing with anything where there could be, where you need to have notification. They're all there. With regards to internal communication, when we're talking with the community consultants, those were community consultant notifications. We did send out the remedials. Emily was the point of contact for the January question and answers. Those were sent to Emily to distribute to the list because, again, that's in the control of your two offices.
Heidi, not to give you a hard time here, but like there were things you decided that the schools should know about, but other folks who are, interested parties here weren't. I think we would all.
No, I mean, we have certain points. We had the community consultants. These were questions and comments. The Blue School has hired Tom Cicillo. Community Board 1 with PEC slip were Laura. I notified all of them because these were the comments that were there. So that was what it is. Those are the people that were there. And based on the comments that I've received from the public, it was, how do the schools know what's going to go on? Particularly, the question was work going to go on during school? We wanted them to understand work was not going to go on during school, so they didn't need to change any plans for February.
No, I respect that. And again, I think we all have a particular sensitivity for the schools, and you share that, and that's good. I just think to the extent we can, have
again, we will.
Standardized
The
process.
sooner we're done with the call, the sooner we can get
All
this
right,
tested.
The other I want to point out is we don't normally allow outside consultants to be included in our discussions as we're reviewing a document based on our general programmatic requirements and responsibilities. So I just want to let you know, we have gone a very far step to include the community as deeply as we possibly can.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think, and the consultants, Laura acknowledged this at the beginning, at the top of her remarks, like we appreciate the fact that there is a sort of robust dialogue back and forth with the consultants and people like Laura who can actually understand the details on our behalf. I just want to distinguish it. And we're not trying to stifle, we're not saying every time you have an internal communication, you need to share it with the whole world. Just like, I think if we could establish that when it was decided something was going to happen the day after tomorrow, I think we would all be well served by just saying, at the point that that's decided, it goes out to the whole group. I think unless there's further conversation, I do want to go back and make sure Tammy, who had yielded her time to the assembly member, doesn't have a follow-up, or are you good, Tammy? Oh yeah, no, go ahead, Tammy.
Everybody ran straight through. This was all the questions and concerns that I had, was really about communication, because I know Saul and his team have one listserv, community board one is a listserv, the schools have listserv. So however we can make it that the information gets out to everybody in a timely manner is going to be the best for everyone, because I think that we are making good progress. Progress needs to keep going. And I would hate the linchpin to having things not work is that the emergency system doesn't actually notify the people who need to know. So that was my whole thing. It's already been covered. I will say nothing else.
Great, okay. So are there other comments on, there are a couple of hands up. Are those comments on the kind of communications notification, or are we? Okay, so I think we want to go on to questions about the actual RDI and the work. There were a bunch of questions in the chat, but
Elaine has her hand up.
Elaine, I think, yeah, you want to go ahead, Elaine?
There are several people at Southbridge that I'm concerned about on the emergency notification. Who is the best person for me to write the emails and the telephone contact numbers? We need to notify in the event of an emergency, back to emergency only. We need to notify our office manager, our director of maintenance. I mean, the call has to go out to several people. The notice has to go to several people, because in case one person's not available, someone else will pick it up, and then we'll have to get our emergency procedures going into action. So question number one, who would be the best person for me to address this to? Heidi, is that you on the notification?
Send it to me, CCing Mimi at Langan Engineering and Rafi here at DEC. I would also include
Laura. Heidi, please include Laura.
Laura, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Laura Dodge and Tom Pasillo, please.
Okay. My question concerns, will the parking lot be closed especially during the test pit investigation? Mimi?
Mimi, you're on mute. Mimi?
I think she's on another call.
You're on.
I can take that
Paul?
one. Yeah, I can take it. The parking lot is not going to be completely closed. We're going to section off all the work areas during the work. We notified the parking lot of where exactly we're going to be working. The contractor is going to bring on fencing, as was mentioned before, and noise curtains to section off each work area, and then restore it at the end of the day.
Question, will anyone parking and the employees be advised of the nature of the work that's going on the lot? I mean, I know if I were pulling my car into a parking lot that was having some type of toxic work going on, I would want to be notified before I pulled into the lot. I mean, and the employees, what protections are afforded to the employees?
So the work areas are going to be sectioned off, and we're going to have air monitoring in the work zone. We're talking about instantaneous concentrations here, and not exposure over a long period of time, and the work is being conducted outside. So there's not really any exposure concerns for on-site workers or people using the parking lot.
I don't know. I think people should still be notified so they have the option of deciding. Just like the community needs notification, people there need notification. So people have the option of deciding what they're comfortable with, which is what a lot of this is about. Some people may not care and pull into the parking lot anyway, and some people may say, not me, no thank you. Despite they don't have your reassurances, they're not in this working group. I think there has to be a notification for the people that are pulling in and parking there. Like I would notify all my friends not to go there. If they're coming into the city and they would ordinarily park in that lot, I would say, don't park in that lot this weekend. There's work going on. I mean, I don't see why why they don't constitute part of the community and get notification in advance of their making so they can make an informed decision.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can? Okay, great. Yeah, I had to log off and come back on, so I may have missed something, but we do coordinate extensively with the parking lot operators, so they're fully aware when we are on site and what activities we're undertaking.
Again, that's the parking lot operators and not the public. So the parking lot operators know what's going on. Maybe the employees there have some idea, although I've been down there and they haven't realized what's going on.
Might it be worth having some kind of sign that says, you know, a lot of construction sites say, if you see concerns at this site, call this phone number. Might it be worth having some sign that says, if you are interested in updates on this project, here's how you sign up for the list? You know, go to this site and sign up for email updates. So anybody who's in the neighborhood or has interest can just do that.
Yeah, I mean, we can put that up. That's fine. We can put a sign up. I'm okay with it.
Great.
But I think the comment was not as much the sign as this particular weekend and telling people that are parking that we're doing environmental testing. I mean, and I guess I would ask DEC if that's something that they think is reasonable and necessary under the circumstances, or if they think that what we've done is sufficient.
It's not, you know, you're following the approved work plan. I think it's sufficient. If you want to get a sign on the parking lot to let those know, that's acceptable also.
Yeah, just to be, what I'm suggesting is a general, like if people were on the relevant list, they would get notice there's something happening this weekend, you know, so like if somebody is an employee there and they think I'd like to know what's going on, they can sign up. To Elaine's point, if somebody parks there and they don't know what's going on, that you're not gonna be able to like do outreach to all potential stakeholders. But I think given that, you know, our conversation about having a kind of integrated, coherent list.
And we have no problem telling employees.
Great.
We're not trying to hide it. So that's not,
No,
we'll take care of that, telling the employees, and we'll talk to DEC about what a sign would look like.
Terrific. Okay, good. Elaine, do you have anything else?
One more question. What hours will the work be conducted at?
Generally, between the hours of about the active excavation will occur between the hours of 7 and 3. We may opt to work longer days. And there will be setup and breakdown at the start and end of each workday.
For Saturday, we're gonna probably, so the camp equipment setup takes a while. So we usually start setting that up before 7, and then the actual intrusive work would start around 8, and they would go from 8 to 4.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
And with the drilling, it'll probably be closer to 7 to 3, but again,
Right.
we may be working longer days.
Right.
I have a question actually for Paul and Mimi. The order of test pit excavation, can you go through that for us? Because it's one thing that with all the stuff we were talking about, we never got a chance to go through.
I believe we're starting with the number 1, the one that's right at 302 Pearl Street.
Right.
And then beyond that, it will be based on consultation with the parking lot operators. So there isn't a firm order of operations after number 1.
Right. So I'd like to just let the community know that. So that is that TP1 or test pit 1 is in the location of the former footprint of the thermometer factory where the higher concentrations of mercury were reported in soil. So that would be where we would suggest starting as well, just so that that area is where the focus will then be. We actually are going to be on site. A project scientist from Excel will be on site to do what we've done in the past, verify air quality in the downwind direction, using all the appropriate meters, watching the procedural aspects of it just to add additional verification that all of the components of the revised remedial design investigation are being implemented. I will also be sending an email to CB1 regarding our observations during that activity. And just to stress again that this is still an investigative activity. When the asphalt is cut up, we're talking about a 5 by 5 foot area. We're transitioning from the 4-inch diameter borings that were done on average during the previous investigative intrusive activities to now to a larger area of exposure of the soil. The immediate work zone monitoring is what dictates actions from that point on. So if levels are detected that are of concern, the best management practices in the remedial design investigation work plan will be immediately implemented. Again, the downwind monitor is there to ensure that there's nothing beyond that work zone. These actions are, again, all included in the work plan. Everything will be there, and the activities will be designed to ensure that we don't have an emergency situation. I mean, that's one of the objectives here. It's not anticipated that we're going to have extreme, vapor issues. Should it start to become apparent, it's going to be immediately addressed. And that's what I think it's really important for everybody to understand, so that people who are outside and walking their dogs or on their terraces or in the vicinity don't have to worry about something catastrophic, because this is a small, controlled, investigative activity. And the purpose of it is to gain the necessary information to inform the larger remediation. Again, a data-driven process. And I know that there's a lot of concerns about some of the specific details, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that between the time that we initially got the remedial design investigation work plan draft, the review of those documents, the intense discussions with the community, the letters that were issued by the community consultants, myself, Tom Facillo, and Keith Brobeck, all of Keith's comments were also incorporated into our discussions, even though Keith couldn't be on the calls that we had. We did address his comments, Tom and I, and the changes that have been made with respect to acknowledging the community's concern that the test pit work and the soil borings get done when schools are not in session, which is what we had recommended and requested on behalf of the community. That work, that is what's happening. It obviously is, in our view, a culmination. Everybody on this call isn't able to see the extensive number of hours and time put into all of the dialogues on the technical and regulatory aspects of this. The key piece of this is that it's a multifaceted plan. All right, all of the different pieces of it are important. The pieces have been addressed to address the concerns that we've raised. Essentially, every one of the concerns that were raised, in my professional opinion, have been satisfactorily addressed. It's time to go and proceed carefully and cautiously, which is exactly the way I think the work will proceed. And I just want to let you know that we will be on site, as we have been in other intrusive activities. Saturday is the day that we're focusing on, because it's when we expected you would be doing the first test pit in the higher mercury impacted area. So we will be able to report back to CP1 in real time.
Okay, great. So if we're good with that, I see Maggie and then Megan with hands up. Go ahead, Maggie.
I'm good. Okay. Thank you, Brian, for making a point about the communication. I mean, the only thing, Heidi, I would say, just to go back to that really quick, is we got a lot of these answers last night, and it just didn't give us time to really adequately prepare for the meeting. So if there are questions in the future, if you could get, some of them could have been done ahead of time to get us a copy of some of the answers, like the MERCON information, that would be really helpful. Laura, and I guess Mimi, I just had a couple technical questions. I threw a bunch of them in the chat. One thing that just came up is, I know you guys keep talking about the monitor being downwind. If you go back and look at the wind reports from, you look at the reports, the EMLCOT reports that came out, often you saw mercury levels in the opposite direction of the wind. I know the VOCs probably behave a little differently. I don't know if you guys noticed that in the reports. So I guess my first question was that if you guys are data driven, are you always going to be downwind with those monitors? If you notice, I don't know how the camps work, if the engineers on site are getting data like in real time and you notice that one of the camp stations in the opposite direction are getting readings, elevated readings, might you guys switch the location of the handheld monitor? That was my first question. Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to ask my second question?
Don't know who wants to answer it. DEC, do you want to take it, or Laura?
I'm going to let either Langan or Laura answer that one, because you guys are actually going to be out there, and I know you do measure wind direction and change it, but I think it's best if you guys explain how that works.
Yeah, so we have a weather station on site that tracks the weather over the course of the day. Then in addition, there's survey tape placed on each camp station to determine wind direction. The wind direction isn't always there. Sometimes there isn't any wind. Sometimes the wind direction can shift momentarily. So that handheld camp unit is not just somebody standing in the same spot all day. It's somebody, screening close to the work zone, further in between the work zone, around the work zone. That unit can take a reading. It takes about a few seconds to collect the reading, so we can collect a lot of readings. It's not a matter of standing in one spot. So it's a very dynamic, situation. We're not only measuring one spot at a time.
Do you guys get those readings? Like, so say there's a camp station that's like an upwind of the work being done, and that starts to show readings. Like we saw some of that.
Yeah, so we have
in the past. Do you guys like migrate over there?
Yeah, we have access on our phone to the readings at any given time at any station. It's straight to our phone. That's one of the benefits that we were talking about of these drone 405 meters that allow this telemetry system, and why we prefer to use it, because it allows us to act very quickly. So the that person is dedicated to the camp. That's all they're doing on site. The other person might be sampling or something else, but there's one person dedicated to the camp. So if we see some blips in the data, we go check the exact unit and see if there's any elevated readings over there. A lot of what I think we're seeing, you mentioned upwind or kind of a random station where it's not close to the work zone. Those drone 405 units, as everybody saw in the study, the accuracy at those low concentrations is not perfect, and in addition, they use a gold sensor that can sense other compounds. So, for example, NO2 is in car exhaust, and that can be picked up by the sensor. So, even on
Paul, I'm gonna push back on that for a second. I dropped a graph into the chat earlier on in the discussion, which came from the report from EMLCOT. And you can see, if you look at any of those reports, of course, I don't have them all in front of me to drop into the chat, but you'll often see earlier in the day readings, because it showed the continuous readings throughout the day, not just the averages that we saw in the data tables in the top of those reports. And you can see often it's 0, 0, 0, and then around 11 o'clock, it looks like work is beginning, and you'll see the graph just go up and up and up. So it's not, which was surprising to me, because I thought, oh my gosh, we're having like blips here, a blip there.
Maggie, I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for a second? What are your qualifications to speak on this? Because I know that there are a number of experts on this call, and I would love to hear from them. I appreciate that you're coming from the right place, but I just want to know what your background is.
Sure. I have a background, I teach science. I have an undergraduate degree in biochemistry. I did a master's degree in teaching in chemistry at Teachers College. I'm an informed community member, and I just have questions. I've spent a lot of time looking through these reports, and I just want to ask some questions. I've spoken with Laura and other members of the community. But if you look at that graph, you can see that the data kind of goes up, up, and up. And then, and that kind of relates to the camp data that the concerns about turning the camp monitors off at the end of the day. So if you look at that data, it's not just like a blip here, a blip there. You're seeing constant levels of mercury, increasing levels of mercury as the day goes on. And I think that was one of the data points that, or pieces of information we were trying to bring up at the last meeting. And some of the concerns the community had about turning the camps off. It also piggybacks on what Elena, what you said about notifying people. This isn't just like a blip of mercury at like 12:30. It was constant and sustained. And that's why I think it would be, important to,
Actually, Maggie, I think that this is Heidi. I understand your concerns. We've had Department of Health and the mercury folks and everybody look at it. And again, this is part of the thing where you have to understand those threshold limits. There are the instruments, and again, I've read the EPA papers. Laura, Tom have read the EPA papers. Our mercury expert has read the EPA papers, and that there are several things. One, not every day is everything always going up. I mean, I've looked through all the different days. There are other issues in there. Is that the numbers that you may be seeing where there may be, as the day is going on and things are going on in the area and everything else like that. But again, the numbers are not exceeding or the threshold value. All right, and they're measuring things also in the work zone. All right, and so that's why there's this multi-layer system. And what I don't want to have happen, and I'm trying to make sure that the public understands, is that through the day, different things are going to happen. Like Paul was explaining, some of these meters are so sensitive that they are going to pick up other emissions from other things in the area. And therefore you could see, I mean, if you think about what you just said, why are you seeing things increasing during the day? And as Paul was explaining, the JO405 can pick up also NO2, and sometimes, again, because of its sensitivity in that. So you would expect to see that in some cases, because again, as the day goes on, you're having more and more traffic through the area. You're depending on versions and things like that.
Well, I mean, this is when they're digging mercury and they're pulling soil out of the ground.
But
so
they're
it does
starting.
make sense.
They're starting a lot of those. I mean, if you look at the activities and look like that, I mean, towards the end of the day, they're actually closing things up. So there actually is less exposed anything towards the end of the day. I mean, you're going to come in at the beginning of the day, they're going to set up, and then it's really the middle of the day where there's actually intrusive activities, because these are standard construction sites. So you're going to have that mobilization time where you have to set everything up. Everybody has to do their health and safety protocol. Everybody needs to check everything. You do the work, and then towards the end of the day, I mean, they're not leaving everything open. So what they're doing is they're closing everything up. They're making sure that the site is closed, and that so there isn't intrusive activity going on up until the end of the day. I think that's something that gets lost in the discussion. And again, it's understandable that everybody has concerns, but we've discussed that with Laura, and we decided that perhaps one of the best ways to help alleviate your concerns is that they're going to use the J505, I have that number right, to
compare the data.
Go by the camp station right there, because we understand your concerns.
Right. If they're really different, like say it's the end of the day, the camp reading, like on the day that I showed the data, it was at 0.8 approaching action level, totally below action level, but you've got the sustained increased level, and you bring the 505 over and they have different data. How do you guys reconcile that?
Well, you're going to look to see what's going on, and you're going to be looking again, like Paul said, they're going to be watching the data, and that you're going to see what's going on in the area. They're going to have the J505. Obviously, particularly on, where is it within the upwind, downwind, and everything else like that. But there is, I mean, they've done a background study. There is an ongoing mercury vapor concentration in everybody's air in particular in Lower Manhattan. That they've established.
No,
that.
you're right.
So they're going to look to see. So they're going to look to see where it is. Again, every day is going to be different. We have thought about that. I understand your concerns. That's why there are all these different protocols in there. And again, that's also why the numbers have been reduced from what would be a standard number as a threshold. So I need you to understand that.
Sorry, Heidi, one quick thing. I just want to point out that Maggie and her science and her background is a valuable part of this whole process. She's the person who found the EPA report about the monitors. Maggie's the person who saw that the monitors were getting turned off at the end of the day. Maggie has actually done the work, so that Nicole might be disparaging of her ideas and her value, I think is highly disrespectful.
Sorry,
I just wanted to put that out there.
Sorry, I was going to jump in. So we should, everybody's entitled to ask. We don't need, people don't need to be credentialed to ask a question, but Maggie, are you?
Thank you.
And I'm not, regardless of background of that, I think I hope I've addressed your concerns. We have looked at it. We have discussed all of these things.
Yeah, listen, Heidi, I think like Laura said, this is still investigative, and she hopes that there's not going to be any issues. I'm sharing these concerns based on data. We're talking about opening up an area of the soil that is, you're talking about 16 square inches versus 3,600 square inches. That's a 22,000% increase. It's a much larger sample size with potential for exposure. So being as cautious and careful, and you guys have all put in this work ahead of time to make sure we're as prepared as possible, but there's the anticipation that there might be a problem based on the data. We took really small you guys took really small samples out of the parking lot, and we saw
which is why we've agreed
increase
to do
in
the test pit.
Right, which is
right?
wonderful.
So we're
and I
going to do the
appreciate
test
you guys.
pit. We're gonna measure it. We have protocols in place. Should things go galley west, I don't expect that to happen. Again, I understand for you and for the public, these aren't normal everyday circumstances. DEC deals with a lot of different types of remedial sites all over the state, the profession, Laura, Tom, all over the country. We are talking to the experts in Mercury. We're talking to the experts in that. We have the protocols in place. We have put in different, these different levels of protection so that, you can stand on the outside of the site and be protected. That was our goal. And, we discussed it,
Then I just
repeatedly.
have a follow-up question.
Can I ask one question about the stuff starting Saturday, and then one other follow-up question?
Sorry,
So we don't get to have,
Maggie, you're going to be, I just want to keep a little order. Maggie, are you good? Or more or less good? I realize not, maybe not.
The clarification was just about the concerns about the data, because it sounded like, Heidi, you're saying that the data in these monitoring stations might just be contamination.
No. I mean,
okay.
what? It's not just that. There is a level of sensitivity, and that's what Paul was bringing up in the thing. That's why we have the Jerome 505, which there is the possibility there is the possibility if somebody parks their very old truck next to, one of our camp stations, obviously the people on site are going to ask them to move, but that could cause a blip on there. Again, those are the things that, you try to control, but you can't always do it because they may set off the volatiles and things like that. That's what I was trying to get at. We are in an active environment. It is a busy area. There are going to be external up factors that can impact the camp stations. You asked why something up gradient could happen or side gradient or something. That's why the camp monitor is there to see what's going on, determine whether it's a valid reading by confirming with the J505 handheld, and then moving on from there. And then we have all those best management practices in place.
Right, and then you guys will leave the monitors on if they're still elevated. At the end of the day, you won't turn
the
them off.
J505 will be monitoring up, to ensure that everything is good.
And how long will that be monitoring? How long will that be monitoring?
Oh, sorry, just Warren. Right, so super quick, but I'm going to just keep ordering.
I can answer that. It's prior to turning off the camps, Langan will verify the air quality with the Jerome 505. If the concentrations are still showing a level that's above background, they'll turn off the camps but continue to monitor until they see a decrease in the concentration over a 15-minute period, indicating that the concentration is going back to background or back to normal with respect to what was previously established. So if it could also just add one point in that it sometimes is hard to relay when you're doing this work. So Langan's professionals are going to be inside the fenced area with the noise blankets and the work zone monitor and the excavator or backhoe doing the test pit excavation. The immediate protection of human health is right inside that work zone, their own employees. So it can't be lost on anybody, because having done this as long as I've done it and the risks that we put ourselves in the environmental field, the protection of the community is obviously one of the primary concerns that everybody has on this project, but the worker in the work zone also has to be protected. So if they start to see anything that is starting to indicate something unexpected that would potentially create a hazard, they're going to immediately act. And the provisions to do that are all built into the remedial design investigation work plan, because it is still an investigative activity. Although we all hope that there's nothing there, they're going to be prepared in the event that there is, but their actions are going to have to be immediate because they need to protect themselves as well. And we don't want anybody exposed. We don't want the workers in the work area exposed, and we absolutely do not want the community to be exposed. So that's why we spent all this time. And all of the comments that have come to me from the community members over the course of this project have been incredibly valuable. And we've taken those very seriously. We've taken them and not just passed them on. We've done our own professional evaluation of their credibility, viability. Not every single comment was on point, but the ones that were have helped informed our commenting, and they were factored into the modifications to the RDI work plan. Specifically the one about several of the comments actually resulted in a lot of these changes. I think you can figure out which ones fit where. But there were extensive collaborative interaction on how we got to where we are right now. And I just want everybody to realize that we're, Tom Facil and I are in our own rights, seasoned professionals doing this for decades. We're extraordinarily focused on the data-driven decisions to ensure the protection of the human health and the environment on this project, understanding the site setting. And I think that we're at that point. I think this is a plan that will be implemented with extraordinary caution, and all the pieces are there. And we need this information. I mean, the Langan HAC needs it, the community needs it, so that we can get that information to get informed decisions on the next steps. So I just wanted to add that in because I sincerely feel like, I'm available to answer any questions, but I think they need to go through CB1 just to keep it manageable for me, but don't feel like you can't continue to ask through CB1, and we're here as a resource.
Great. Okay. So Megan, are your hand was up before. Are you good now, or do you want to go?
I just wanted to thank you. 2 points. One, when you're working with the MERCON, I know that what website talks about it because I went and I read it. I don't just pretend. I read that it does immediately impact the vapor, but then it says it takes a chemical reaction and it takes a considerable amount of time for it to complete and turn it into the more stable version of itself. So my question is, if it does go bad, which we hope it doesn't, they spray MERCON. So what will be the process? And then if that is something that does, and they want to shut down, test pit 1, will that then push any of the work into the following week when the kids are there? That's my question. I'm just worried, or can we have a promise that if something goes screwy, that you guys won't be doing these test pits when the kids are in school the next day on the Monday? That's all I just want to know about. And then my other one is, and then on the 15th, they're going to start all the borings. Is any of the sound?
There's no 15th. No, the 20th.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I wrote down, that was the wrong date. No, the 21st. Thank you. The 21st to when we're on holiday. Is there any sound mitigation that's going to be put in place for the families and for the people who actually live there during all this? It's going to be like 5 to 10 days of drilling. 2 questions. The MERCON, could you please, 3. MERCON, could we make sure that you're not going to do any of the test pits during the school week? And then what about the sound for the following week? Because that's happening next. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So for the on the test pit protocol, Laura was referring to the management practices that are taken into consideration if there's any elevated readings. So there's going to be I'll go over the procedure. So the test pit is excavated. As it's excavated, the soil is stockpiled adjacent to the test pit. During this time, we're going to be taking, constantly taking readings in the work zone with the work zone station and the handheld monitor. If there's anything indicating that mitigation measures need to be taken place, the first mitigation measure would be spraying Mercon X onto the exposed soil. And in addition to that, covering any exposed soil. If the concentrations, and just to be clear that the Mercon X has a short-term effect, and then it also has a chemical reaction where it's converting the mercury into non-volatile form. So it is a proven effective, and it's in all the EPA guidance documents for mercury cleanups. So in the event that the initial management practices were not effective, then the test pit would be backfilled and closed up. And that's the procedure. So we're not going to leave anything open. There's no protocol to leave anything open for longer than we need to. So everything will be restored after the work is complete. And then there's no plan at all to continue the work into the week. That's not part of our plan. So we're going to work on
can
Saturday.
take up to, I'm sorry, I called it a guy who uses Mercon, and he said it can take up to 24 hours to completely do its process. So that's just my worry, is that with that 24 hours, do you wait the 24 hours and then retest?
So it has an immediate effect, and if in the event that the Mercon and covering stockpiles was not effective in mitigating vapor concentrations in the ambient air, then the material goes back in the hole.
Okay.
And things get closed up. None of this is going to take longer than, we're not going to leave anything open for longer than an hour. That's part of the work plan. And then I think the other question was noise curtains. So we have a plan to have fencing and noise curtains. We're going to maintain those on the site throughout the course of the remedial design investigation work plan for the test pits and the borings. Lastly, just some considerations on schedule. We're definitely working on Saturday. It's supposed to be a beautiful day. Sunday, there's some potential weather. So, it's a possibility that we have to push, if we can't finish the test pits in one day, push to the following weekend. But that would be the course of action we'd take there.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the clarification. I'm glad to hear the sound barriers are sticking around too. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Good. Okay, so next up we have Nicole, and I saw Warren. I think your hand is back down, but why don't we go to Nicole? And we are going to try to wrap up soon, so keep everybody,
Yes, Jason.
I mean, I just want to thank everyone.
Nicole and then Jason, Brian.
Sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Nicole.
Okay, I just wanted to thank everyone for the hours of work that have been put into this and to making sure that the protocols are above and beyond. This Seaport resident is interpreting this data and saying, it seems like it's going to be safe for us. I just want to be able to not interpret and know and hear from Mimi and Laura and Tom Fasillo that if your children lived across the street, would you feel comfortable having them in their homes this weekend and in the week that follows, given all the safety protocols? I'm thinking that the answer is yes. I just want to hear it from you.
Yeah, I can tell you definitively yes. I actually live in CB1. I have 3 young children. I live directly across the street from a brownfield site that was cleaned up outside my window with these same protocols in place. In fact, the protocols on that site were less robust than the ones on this site. And I am very confident that it will be a safe environment to be this weekend.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have, if you're good, Nicole, Jason.
That was my question, and I appreciate the
Sorry, I think Laura was going to comment too, just because I know she's the independent.
Oh, sorry, forgive me.
Maybe it's Langan.
That's
Sorry.
okay. No, I also am very comfortable, and if we lived there and my children were there, I'd be comfortable with the approach, given the robust nature of this work plan and all the different provisions that are in it. we did have concerns before. Those concerns have been satisfactorily addressed. So I definitely would be comfortable. And I think that the community should feel that, we've taken all the appropriate steps and the work is going to proceed very cautiously, very methodically, as has been explained. And we still are available through CB1 if you have any additional concerns.
And I would also confirm that, I agree and definitely feel comfortable that with all the precautions being taken, this work can be done safely.
Are you good, Nicole? Great. Jason. Sorry.
Yes, I had the same question. I wish you guys had almost led with that on each one of your presentations. It would have saved me a lot of heartache with my other partner who live across the street. So I really appreciate that you guys would not feel uncomfortable coming in and out of the area as this work is going on. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so Warren, you had
I had a question. It's been answered.
Okay, great. I see Emily and I think no other hands. Is that okay? So Emily, if you could go.
Thank you so much, and appreciate everybody's hard work on this. And I guess what I just want to say is that I appreciate deeply the fact that we have gotten to here, and just want to comment on the fact that it is only because of rigorous research and question asking and not taking just what is been proffered at face value that we have gotten to a plan that we can feel comfortable with. And, even just having, from the very first day that, Langan made their first presentation at the PEXLA PTA, this is a very different place that we are now. And so I just want to call out that it is due to community comment, community boards, volunteers, people speaking up and saying without fear of, or maybe with fear and doing it anyway, calling this out that we've gotten here. So this is a community that has been through a lot. They've been through 9/11. They've been told in times past that things were safe when they weren't. And we just need to acknowledge that feeling of not just accepting things at face value, because I was there at the very first presentation that Langan gave in our cafeteria, and I'm here now. And I'm deeply appreciative that we are all being able to sit around a table and ask these questions. They're very important.
Okay. And we appreciate your questions and comments and everybody's participation today. I don't see any other hand. Nicole, your hand is still up, but you're done, right? Okay, good. All right. So with that, I think we are about ready to adjourn this. I did direct message a couple folks. There is a request that if the state agencies could stay on for a minute, and the community board, there's just a question from the community board on a matter unrelated to this project. So that would be your cue if you are here for this project, like the consultants and Howard. Sorry.
I had one quick follow-up.
I would suggest the electeds and the elected offices and the community board and the state agencies, if you would be willing to stay for a minute, we would appreciate it. But other than that, did you have a quick?
The last one is, I thought there used to be a test pit that was going to be closer to where the gas station is, and that is that right? Or why isn't there one being done there? That's my question.
We had suggested consideration of a test pit at that location. We had discussions with Langan about that, and they indicated that the concern was petroleum odors that might be encountered when the excavation is done. They indicated as there will be several borings installed in that area, and they will, rather than put a test pit in, they will do detailed observations on any odors that are encountered and delineate the area. Since there will be multiple test pits, that'll actually give more broad information on the the potential for vapors being
So
generated.
characterize it using the boring holes versus opening up a big section of it. Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, good to end on on some specifics and some clarity. So I think we are officially adjourning this work group. So anybody who's here for the for this project, if you could jump off, and the elected.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. All right.